The M1 highway in Johannesburg was finally cleared after being closed off to traffic between Xavier Street and Boysons Road following a shootout between police and cash-in-transit robbers on Wednesday night. On Thursday, Acting National Commissioner of the SAPS, Lieutenant General Tebelo Musikili, commended the Gauteng police for tracing and arresting the suspects within 3 hours of the commission of the crime. Are we seeing a spike in crime as the festive season draws closer? Well, Calvin Rafadi, BizzTracers Forensic Investigator, joins us to unpack this further. Calvin, appreciate your time this evening. Would you provide an overview of the recent cash-in-transit heist incidents in South Africa, including the locations and frequency of some of these incidents?
Yeah, good evening, Hugo, and good evening to your viewers. Yes, no, indeed. Now, towards the festive season, we're going to see a lot of this particular type of crime whereby the criminals now, they've come out in forces and robbing of this particular cash-in-transit. But we also like to say we applauded the police on the recent N1 cash-in-transit burst, where one of the trigger-happy of those criminals was gunned down and 2 were arrested. And this is how it should be done, whereby police, they get ready, they wear proper outfit like your bulletproofs, and then they gear up and eradicate this type of a crime. Unlike what we've seen in Makado, and we still say the Makado shooting, it was one of the typical death squad, and we can explain that later in the show as well.
So some of these individuals or some of these robbers are still on the run. What do we know about the size of the gang that attempted this heist?
Yeah, look, we do not know the numbers, but usually because there's those 2 that were arrested, obviously they confessed the other crew of their team. But you know, this type of crime normally it's a gang of around 10 to 15 members, whereby each of those members, they've got a role. You get those who are at the off ramp waiting for the aftermath of the particular event. They will load the money and then fled off with the money. You get those that are using crowbars to, after the bombing of those particular trucks, to pick up the money and open those particular trucks. And then you get the drivers who ram this particular vans so that it can come to a standstill. So there are a number of them, role players, but bear in mind also they are very heavily armed, very dangerous, and you get even ex-militant from the SADC region who are joining in this gang.
Now, you speak about them being heavily armed, Calvin. From what we understand, the police, I think, found, a couple of rifles, if not 2 or 3. Now, this obviously, when you talk about Makado, where the police exchanged gunfire for 90 minutes, suggests that these robbers, or cash-in-transit robbers, were not heavily armed.
Yeah, no, indeed, they are very heavily armed and also with automatic rifles. And remember, in South Africa, we do not have such of those type of other firearms, which are automatic rifles, and you've seen they use even a solar tape to have extra magazine attached to one another. So that's why we're saying most of these guns, they come as far as from our African neighboring regions, from the military, and even the explosives that they use on this particular bombing of these trucks, they get them from the mining explosives, some of the military base, even as far as from Africa. But what I want to highlight also, Hugo, if something is intelligence-driven, now we're jumping into the Makado thing. If it's intelligence-driven, it was an operation that was observed from January, as the police have alluded. There is no need for them to go on a lethal force, because by that time, the period they had, they could have profiled all those suspects, even including those who were trigger-happy, and not come to a point of even killing an innocent maid and an innocent garden boy, coming with an explanation that they should have seen those guns and they could have called the police. Because you must bear in mind how these people operate, and that's why we always say police need to partner with some of these sangomas. Because by the time they're in a safe house, what they do, they put all their guns in one room, maybe even in a steel bag, perform certain rituals. So the maid and the garden boy could have not have seen that. So by killing them and saying, no, they saw the guns, they could have called the police, it's either near or there. But what we are saying, if something is intelligence-driven, let it show decisiveness of profiling and intelligence-driven and not death squad. But with this one of N1, we applaud them. They did a very great job and they eradicated the proper criminals.
Now, if my memory serves me right, Police Minister Bekele has often advocated that it's important for the police to protect themselves, and if they have to shoot in order to do that, they must do that. Is it a case of, when we come back to the Mercado situation, a situation where it made more sense for them to kill the criminals than to capture them?
Yeah, look, I mean, if you are caught up in a crossfire with a criminal, obviously you are also well armed. They need to shoot at those criminals. And by the way, some of the profiling of those particular criminals that were in Mercado, they were indeed cash in transit, and also some of them, they were most wanted even as far as from Pretoria. But what we are saying is, if you are saying something is intelligence driven, you have opted to have known who are the trigger happy, profile all the people, so that you do not even kill innocent people at that particular space of time. But let's say now the police, they are chasing criminals and the criminals shooted back at them. They are wearing bulletproof. They must shoot at those criminals and eradicate them if it comes to a push, because of their lives and even other people around them. Their lives could be in danger.
Now, Kevin, earlier you talked about we're approaching the season where cash in transit heists are likely to be on the rise. Now, what measures have law enforcement agencies taken to address and prevent these heists, and how effective have these efforts been?
Well, we had, I think, a week ago, a minister said, no, they are now have revived the crime intelligence. And if that's the case, then the crime intelligence by now, they should be sitting with the data of knowing who are the most criminals that are committing this particular cash in transit. Because, by the way, they are well known. Their modus operandi are well known, even though some of them, they've opted now into venturing into kidnappings. Because the same criminals that are into cash in transit, most of them now they've opted to be in the kidnapping space. So if crime intelligence is on board, we will say, no, we've got a relief. And then obviously now most of these criminals, they can be eradicated from our communities. Because their modus operandi is known. They are even well known in the community. Because some of them, once they make money, what they do, they buy a fleet of kumbis. They open up bottle stores, they open up pubs. So they are well known. I mean, there are even girls who will say, no, I only date abantu bamakati, meaning ikati, it's a cat. It's a slang language for this particular cash in transit. They call them amakati. So they are well known people, and then police must be proactive, but with the help of the crime intelligence.
So you raise an important issue, and that's the role of the communities in identifying these individuals, because many of them live amongst us. And when you speak about the girls and how they date these individuals, it's obvious that they're known. What can the communities do? Do the police have the right relations with the communities to elicit some of that information before these crimes are committed?
Yes, look, Hugo, I'll be quite honest with you. Before we became forensic investigators and went to schools, actually part of the money that helped me to go to school is the money that I was receiving as an informant. And part of the modus operandi that we've learned is that most of the cash in transit, what normally happens, the criminals, they look for a safe house within that particular area. So we urge the communities, once you see suspicious movement in your neighbor, or maybe the house next door at your neighbor, you must report it to the police. But the police must ventilate that particular information correctly so, and then call crime intelligence, and then they observe and see, okay, why are there so many cars in our neighborhood, and then it is not known, these people, where they are coming from. And then that's a way of eradicating this particular type of crimes, whereby communities now, they team up, they know who's in their area, who are visiting in their areas. Because the reason why these criminals, they will commit a crime and have a safe house within that area where they're going to commit a crime is because they don't want to drive far away and then they get caught along the way. So communities, they need to work with the police. They need to inform the police, including sangomas who are performing rituals for these particular criminals. They need to start helping the police, and police need to pay their informants on time so that they can get sufficient information and proactive information.
Now, when we take a look at this particular crime that we are discussing, the Boyson's shootout, that crime scene was shut down, I think, for all over 24 hours. And I suppose part of that was to do a lot of forensic work. What is the role of forensic investigations or investigators in dealing with cash in transit heists? I mean, what techniques and technologies are used to gather evidence and identify suspects, sorts of guns or artillery and so on?
Look, there are many factors once the crime scene is concealed, whereby, they wait for guys like the photographers. They wait for the forensic guys to come and collect the DNA. They wait for the cell phone guys to come and do what we call a cell phone dump. And then obviously, because some of those criminals, perhaps they ran out from that particular car and into the neighboring. So they need to sometimes call even the dog unit, K9, to search for those particular criminals. So they don't want, because they are very heavily armed, they must seal that place so that even when those criminals are still within the area, they don't get caught up with some of the innocent civilians. So it was very important for them to seal that area until they collect all the data that will be used so that they can place even those that ran away into the crime scene once they are caught.
Rafadi, BizzTracers Forensic Investigator, appreciate your time this evening.